If you've been following my videos, you know I've recently made some videos on the initiative 1639 here in Washington State, an anti-gun initiative funded by a Bloomberg group and backed by a bunch of his billionaire friends. Well, in my previous videos, I said it being taken off the ballot was a small victory for Alan Gottlieb and the Second Amendment Foundation, but it wasn't a large victory because it could still go back on the ballot depending on what the Supreme Court says. And in those videos, I said the NRA had nothing to do with it. The NRA helped in no way. They spent not a penny. They raised a lot of money, but they didn't spend a penny. So I said, this isn't the time to be congratulating each other and slapping people on the back, especially not the NRA, because it wasn't a major victory. And today I was proven right, or actually yesterday I was proven right, unfortunately, because the Supreme Court said, yeah, it's going to go back on the ballot. Because the Supreme Court basically ruled, and here's the ruling that they used to put it back on the ballot. They said, yes, it was done improperly. Yes, it was written wrong. Yes, they used deceptive methods to get the signatures they needed, but they're not obligated because there's no law that tells the Supreme Court that they have to follow the rules of the initiative process. They can just put it on there if they want to. And of course, being in the pocket of Bloomberg and other billionaires in the anti-gun industry, the Supreme Court of Washington said, we want it on there. So it went on. It's going to be on the ballot. So I wanted to take some time today to go over what this does. And what this does, in my opinion, is it really supports the whole notion that I've had all along, that I've been trying to tell people, that these laws aren't meant to stop crimes. They're meant to stop common people from having guns, especially poor people. Just how the original gun laws were meant to keep black people from having guns, these new laws are meant to have common people not be able to have guns. And this is the way gun laws work. They're always very discriminatory, very prejudiced. So I wanted to look into this today, tell you everything it does, and tell you why this supports my ideas. And what it is the billionaires that support these things, Bloomberg and the other people, they don't care about crime. They're isolated from crime. What they care about is you and me having the means to overturn them. When 1% of the population starts owning 99% of the stuff, history has shown what happens to that 1%. They end up with their heads on pikes. And they're trying to prevent that. So it's not about crime. It's about common people not having the means to fight back. So let's go over what this law does here, or what this initiative would do if it became law. We'll look at it one thing at a time here, and I'll try to edit it down to where I'm not rambling too much so that it's sort of watchable. But the first thing this law would do, if it became a law, is it would say that you have to have a concealed carry permit to buy a firearm. This is going to stop no crimes, because anyone who buys a firearm goes through the exact same background check when they buy that individual firearm than they would when they got a concealed carry permit. So it doesn't add any level of protection to actually getting the gun. But what it does add is almost a $60 charge plus your time and expenses of getting there and getting the permit and waiting for the permit to actually be able to buy a gun. So that's a monetary restriction on actually buying a gun. If you're going to buy your first gun, you have to add $60 in 30 days at least on top of it, of your time going back and forth to wherever you're coming from to get the gun. That's a restriction on common people, especially poor people owning guns. It does nothing to stop crime, like I said, because all it does is make a redundant check that you do anyway when you take the background, when you buy the gun. So that's a whole ridiculous thing. And plus, this is an open carry state. You can walk around with a gun on your hip with no carry permit. So why would you need one to buy a gun? It makes no sense. It's just there to add a monetary restriction to buying guns, a monetary obstacle to buying a gun. Another thing this law would do if it became a law is it would add mandatory training to you being able to purchase a gun. Now, mandatory training does nothing to stop crime, does nothing to even stop accidents. There's no evidence to show that. States that have mandatory training laws for their carry permits have no lower accidental rates of death or injury than states that have no requirements. There's no evidence to support that that would do anything to stop any type of injuries with a firearm. All it does is add a fee. You got to go pay for training. And in fact, in the law, it says you can just go pay to have a certificate as long as that company that issues a certificate offers training. So in other words, it's just you have to pay money before you can buy a gun. Another monetary obstacle to the common people. And plus, the time to go take the training is another big monetary obstacle to the common person who works every day. So just more monetary obstacles to the common people owning guns. This law, if it became a law, would also establish a 10-day waiting period on semi-automatic rifles. Now you might say, well, that doesn't add cost in any way to someone buying a gun. Yeah, it does. Because if you live in a rural area and you have to take time off work or come on the weekends or travel to go to a place to buy a gun, which is a lot of people in a state like Washington, well, now you have to do that multiple times. You have to come purchase the gun, you have to go back home, and then later you have to come back and pick the gun up again, hoping that it goes through that time after the 10-day wait period, that something else hasn't happened. So that creates a monetary obstacle and a time obstacle. And when they create time obstacles, that's still a monetary obstacle for people who work for a living. If you work for a living, your time is money. You've got other things you need to do. So having to go to buy the gun, go home, and then come back again, that's travel expenses, time expenses, etc. That's just another monetary obstacle to the common people owning guns. Now, another thing it would do is it would impose a $25 fee for every semi-automatic rifle purchased by anyone in the state. You'd pay a $25 tax. Now, this, I don't have to explain how this is a monetary obstacle to people. If you're saving up to buy a firearm, especially if you're saving to buy like something like an LCR or actually even one of the Rugers. What's that little Ruger, the EC9 or whatever it is? If you're saving to buy that and you've got to come up with $250, and it's taking you a while to save that $250, having to save another $25 might be another week or two. Especially if you drive all the way in to buy the gun, then you find out, oh crap, you mean I got to have more money than the cost of the gun, and you got to go home and wait again and come back again. So that right there, pretty obvious how that's a monetary obstacle to poor people or common people owning guns. Now, the next thing this initiative would do if it became law is it says you have to store your guns safely, or if they get stolen from you, you're responsible financially and criminally. And they don't even tell you how you have to store safely. They just say, basically, if you get a gun stolen, they're implementing a system here where you're going to have to pay because someone broke into your home and violated your private space and stole from you. Now, you are the perpetrator of the crime, not the victim, in the way they write this law. And then they don't even define a way that you can say, well, I did what you defined, so I'm not liable. They left it undefined so that nothing is a safe way as far as they're concerned. And plus, even if they said you got to put it in this type of a safe, well, how many common people or poor people can spend enough money to buy a very specific safe they tell you to buy? So once again, that has nothing to do with safety because stolen guns don't amount to any amount of noticeable crime and crime statistics. So it's not about stopping crime. It's just about putting another monetary expense and liability on common people who own guns. And speaking of liability, another thing this initiative would do, one of the worst things this initiative would do, is it would make the state completely clear of any liability if they did something wrong. Like if they charged you wrong for unsafe storage, if they denied you a purchase, if they did anything that they wanted to do to deny you your rights to exercise your Second Amendment freedoms in this country, they are not liable. You cannot sue them. This law states you have to sign a waiver up front that says, cannot sue the state if they do something illegal to me or something wrong to me. That's a horrible part of this bill. And knowing that poor people or common people can't afford big fancy lawyers to fight things like this and they will just sign the paperwork, that's another attack on the common person owning guns. Now, another thing this bill does that's really dangerous, if you ask me, is it requires the new expanded background checks in the state to include the Department of Health. Meaning your health records have to be available for the check. And the way it's written now, if the health department says, no, that's a HIPAA violation, well, then they'll just deny your background check. You won't get a carry permit. You won't be able to buy a gun. That stops, of course, anyone who doesn't have the money to fight that from having a gun. That's an obstacle to common people owning guns. But it's also, like I said, a HIPAA violation. This is something that even the ACLU has been fighting. If you've been adjudicated by the courts, that's court records. That's not health records. If you've ever been adjudicated, been found mentally unfit, they don't have to look at your medical records to know that. That's a court record. So they only want to look at medical records because they know that common people or poor people, their records might show, oh, well, they took an antidepressant for 3 years when things got bad, or they took one after their divorce or whatever, and they'll be like, oh, we have questions about your mental health because you took an antidepressant. So they know they'll be able to exploit that. That's why they want to be able to look at health records. Rich people aren't going to let their health records be seen. They'll find ways to make sure it's not seen. Poor people won't have that option. Once again, even this is an attack on the common person's right to own and purchase a firearm. And to close out, there's just a few other really stupid things it does that I won't go into too much, but it creates a rule that says all the paperwork for buying a semi-automatic weapon has to be in triplicate. Paperwork in triplicate. The state abandoned paperwork a long time ago because they found it to be ineffective and not useful in doing research. So they went to digital systems. This requires them to go back to an archaic paper system that the state has already said doesn't work. So that's just ridiculous in itself. This initiative also raises the age of anyone to own a semi-automatic rifle. That includes, like a 10-22 from Ruger, any semi-automatic rifle, to the age of 21. That means they can't even possess it for anything. There's no exceptions for hunting, no exemptions for hunting or anything like that in the thing. So if you're an 18-year-old who's out on his own and likes to go deer hunting to help feed your family, you're out of luck. You can't use a semi-automatic rifle. And any rifle that is semi-automatic is designated an assault weapon by this bill. Even though they don't know what assault weapon is, any weapon in this description that they use in this initiative, if it uses the energy from a fired round to eject a casing and load another casing, that's an assault rifle. That's any semi-automatic weapon, handgun or rifle. So it's just ridiculously flawed in that aspect completely. And the final stupid thing it does is if you own firearms, if you actually purchase one, then for the rest of your life, you are going to have an annual background check review, meaning that once a year, they'll have a time that they can try to find something to take your rights away, no matter what it is, because this law opens it up to a lot of things. If they decide, a year into you owning guns, that they want to try to collect a lot of the guns that got purchased, they'll just say, well, we'll submit these requests to the Department of Health, and if they turn us down, we'll just go get all those people's guns because they failed their annual review. So this law right here, like I said, once again, really takes effect on people who can't afford to fight for their rights legally in court, which I can't afford to. I couldn't afford a high-priced lawyer to go to court and fight for me for months to do something like this. So once again, this keeps common people from owning guns. So as you can see, this initiative is just poorly written and disgracefully written from the beginning. It's not designed in any way to stop crime. Nothing in here will stop any crime. There are no discernible amounts of crime that this would affect, period. And the people who write it actually even admit that stuff. They say, yeah, we know it won't solve any problems, but we got to do something. And I've always said that it's better to do something than nothing argument is garbage. It's always better to do nothing than do the wrong thing, especially when people's rights are at stake. So this bill is nothing but a thinly veiled attempt to keep common people from owning guns. It's a step in disarming the masses so that the 1% can be more in charge. So if you support this bill, you're misguided. If your goal is to reduce crime or reduce violence, well then start looking in other places because you're not going to be able to do it with this bill. This bill is just another step towards the wealthy in this country controlling everything and you and me not having a say in it.